right, Chillcast MMA, and I'm joined by Ben Kiely at the Jive Master on Twitter. And like I said, you guys know I usually do this. Just like to bring you guys some chill conversations with some chill people. So Ben, how are you today?
I'm chill. I think I've got the memo. Like I'm wearing my chill attire. It's a balmy 16 degrees Celsius here in Dublin, which is like about 60 degrees Fahrenheit. So we're going through a bit of a heat wave now at the moment. It's a good time.
Yeah, it's definitely, I feel that it's just like summer's in full effect right now. I'm definitely feeling it over here in Philly. I say that as I sit here in a sweater, but you know how it is. Yeah,
I
but
know. I heat.
I just like I said, just wanted to bring you on and just touch on some general things. Like I said, I know you're over there, you're covering the European scene. So we've got a couple fighters. Just want to touch on some general points on them, and then once we wrap it up, we'll just talk about some MMA sort of current events, so to speak, and we'll get out of here. So how's that sound?
That sounds perfect, man.
All right, so the first fighter up that I want to talk about is Alexander Rakic. He's obviously been on a tear in the UFC. He currently sits 12-1, and the last time we saw him, he got Jimmy Manuwa out of there in the first round in under a minute. So when you think of Alexander Rakic, the reason why I want to ask you that, this fighter specifically for anyone watching is because you might have a different perspective than the guys here over in the States. So when I ask you about Alexander Rakic, what comes to mind?
I think of him as a bit of a dark horse of the UFC light heavyweight division. He's a prospect I've seen coming from since his UFC debut, but again, like he may not be as well known stateside because he's been fighting on a lot of those smaller European fight nights. So I've seen him. I know a lot of people haven't, and I know that knockout of Jimmy Manuwa, the one that I think Manuwa retired after that fight. That was a bit of a coming out party for him. And if you're looking at potential problems for John Jones in the future, assuming of course Jones does it against Santos this weekend, Rakic is right up there as like one of the ones I bet he's keeping an eye on. It's also another thing that he kind of represents is just a kind of new blood in that light heavyweight division. For a long time, it was, there was a dearth of talent there, and now we've got the likes of Johnny Walker coming up. We've got Rakic. There's a lot of those names that you feel like will be contesting for a title soon. So, and I think Rakic might be leading that pile. I think he might have the most potential out of all of them.
Yeah, that definitely makes sense, and you can definitely see his potential. I mean, all you would have to do is look at his last fight with Manuwa. But light heavyweight is special in the fact that the number one and number two guy being DC and John Jones. The story as it stands today is that they're essentially a league ahead of the guys that are in that 3 on down spot to 15 and so on. And we've seen guys like, Phil Davis, Rumble Johnson, they go on nice win streaks, but then they get close to that defining moment, so to speak. And, we see guys like Anthony Smith, they can't necessarily show up and show out against John Jones. Guys like Alexander Gustafsson with DC and so on and so on. But when you take a look at Rakic, you use the word dark horse or use that term dark horse. What do you think it is that makes him fit into that role? Like that he's just not another light heavyweight on the up and up. He actually has some serious potential that we as MMA fans need to look into.
I think it's that killer instinct he has. Like I know Johnny Walker has it too. Like he's getting highlight reel knockouts, and they might be a bit more high profile. But I think there's more unknowns about Johnny Walker. Like he's had losses on his career. He had a career before the UFC, and we've only really seen his striking as such in the UFC. Whereas Rakic, like I think he's been a distance in the octagon, and like obviously he's dealing with veterans like Jimmy Manuwa like so easily. I just think I just think he has a better base, and maybe it's just what they say, it's the punch that you don't see coming that knocks you out. So I think he might be the punch that people don't see coming.
Yeah, definitely. I think that makes sense. And there's definitely going to be a lot of opportunity to see him moving forward because, like we're talking about now, light heavyweight is one of those divisions where got a lot of movement. Going to be interesting to see who comes out of that middle of the pack as the next contender. So when you try and look forward for him, who do you think makes sense next? Is it a Dominic Reyes, a Johnny Walker, or do you give him someone a little bit longer in the tooth? How do you approach it?
I don't think there's anything. I think maybe Johnny Walker might be a bit soon. I think maybe keep them separate for maybe another fight or two. Um, I am a big fan of matching up prospects against prospects, but maybe it's a little bit too soon for those two. Yeah, again, you can't really go wrong. You could give him someone like on a Glover maybe, or someone in that category. Misha Serkinov would be a good fight. Someone around that kind of range. Again, he's young. He's got a lot of potential. We've seen a lot of prospects maybe pushed a little bit too much too soon recently, the likes of Aaron Pico and them. So maybe just give him another fight or two. Like Manu had just retired, so maybe he was just at the end, like the very end of his career. So maybe give him someone maybe little bit closer to their prime next.
Yeah, definitely. Hopefully, I mean, in my perfect world for light heavyweight, they have another one of those all, division cards where it's like how they did back in the day where it was all heavyweight. I would like to see that, do a one night tournament where we can figure this thing out moving forward. But we're going to keep that theme going, talking about guys on the up and up right now. So another one, Peter Yan. He's UFC bantamweight. Obviously, he's on a tear as well. He sits at 13-1. His last one was over Jimmy Rivera. Lots of talk about guys like Aljamain Sterling and Henry Cejudo. We know he's on the shelf till 2020. And Joseph Benavidez, he just picked up a nice win at UFC Minneapolis over Hussier Formiga. So when you look at Peter Yan, and again, like I'm asking this because us guys over here, we may just naturally lean towards Aljo or Benavidez, but you are looking at it from a little bit of a different perspective. So when you think of Peter Yan, and sort of this craziness at bantamweight, where do you think he fits into all of this right now?
I think he's right up there at the top of the division right now. Like I was a little bit late on his hype train. I didn't really know much about him before he entered the UFC, but then once he entered, like everyone found out what he's all about. Like what he did to Rivera was pretty damn phenomenal. Like I th I think that Henry Cejudo is going to be out for the rest of the year. He's going to be out for a long time, and I would prefer to see Cejudo fight Benavidez next. So it looks like the bantamweight division there's a chance it might not be defended for a long time. So if that's the case, I wouldn't mind an interim title fight, and I think that if they're doing an interim title fight, Peter Yan versus Aljo is the fight to make. I think that'll be an exceptional fight. I think you'd find out a lot about both fighters. I think whoever comes out of that one the victor is definitely ready to challenge Cejudo for the title.
Definitely. And I like to talk about like marketing and things like that. So I do want to just sort of, I wasn't planning to ask this, but it's just sort of on my mind right now. Okay, so say Cejudo comes back 2020 and you've got sort of a three-way tie. You've got Benavidez, you've got Peter Yan, and you've got Aljamain Sterling. If you're looking at it from Peter Yan's side, how would you argue his case over Aljamain and Joseph Benavidez? Like, how would should that discussion come up and you're his manager, what would you tell him to say, or what would you say in his representation to make sure he gets the next shot?
It well, the obvious one is that the UFC are trying to break into Russia. Him being Russian, they just had their first Russian event this year, last year, and Khabib obviously is their big star there. He looks to be a big pay-per-view draw. It looks like he's going to get the full promotional backing. So the way I'd frame is that listen, next time Khabib is fighting or next time there's a Russian card, put me in the main event against Aljamain Sterling, 5 rounds for the interim title. Or if Cejudo's back, yeah, well, Cejudo's the one to make. Like we've seen that happen with a lot of fighters recently, where like Rose went to Brazil to fight Andrade. Like Cejudo seems like the type of guy who wouldn't mind going to Russia to fight someone like Yan. And I think Cejudo would be pretty confident in that fight. Although I don't know, it might be a little bit more competitive than a lot of people might think.
Yeah, there's it's just interesting because with the double champ era that's sort of going on right now, when a champion's out for a while, that jams up two divisions. So it's definitely going to be interesting to see who comes out of that ahead when Cejudo is ready to return in 2020. I guess in the same sort of, they're competing for the same title shot, just in two different divisions. Kai Kara France, he's another one. I wasn't planning to necessarily ask, but he is on my mind right now. What do you make of him and sort of his run to the title? There's not a lot of flyweights left, and there's definitely not a lot left on the UFC's roster that can fit into that up and comer role. But he's definitely one of the ones that can. What do you make of him in this picture?
I feel bad for him because there is a lot of unknowns there. Wasn't that long ago in the UFC we're kind of talking about closing out the division, and they were letting flyweights go who were coming off losses. Like so I don't know. I don't know what he's fighting for. Like I don't know whether the smart move for him is to move up or to stick around. Maybe if Benavidez wants a fight, like that could happen. But aside from that, like he's kind of fighting with no goal in mind. Obviously, he thinks that the belt is, there, and like he has every right to be. But because the UFC haven't said explicitly whether they're keeping that division going or not, it looks like for the time being they are. But I don't know if that's just if they're going to keep the contendership queue going, or is it going to be a case of, okay, if we need to fill in a main event, we can have Cejudo defend the flyweight title on that event, like, and just call up anyone. I'm not sure whether that division's going to be the same structurally as other divisions.
Yeah, it's definitely it's got to suck to be a flyweight right now, just because of so many, like you just said, so many uncertainties. So, well, I guess that remains to be seen whether or not he moves up or slips into a number one contender fight, just due to the fact that the division is so thin right now. But I guess we'll definitely have to keep an eye on that. And one other person, we're going to move up one more weight group in a different promotion now. James Gallagher. He's a polarizing figure. We could go any angle, as me being someone that's over here in the States, he's a bit of a meme, but he's also someone that's starting to put numbers on the board. So I just want to ask you, like, what is the story like over there? Like, what is the temperature for him like over there? What are the people saying more so where he's, from? What is the area's take on him?
I think that there's a lot of pride among the MMA community for him. He was kind of like our prospect. Like he was one everyone saw coming. Everyone heard the stories about him being discovered by John Kavanagh when he was like tapping out grown men when he was like a teenager in BJJ tournaments. So it is good to see him kind of thrive in the professional scene, where he's become like a headliner for Bellator. Like he headlines the smaller shows. If there's a Dublin card ever on, they'll be looking to get him on as the headline event. And I was very impressed with how he dealt with that Bandejas loss. Like he was straight in doing interviews like the Monday after the fight. He didn't shy away from it. That was a very mature response, considering he did become a meme. You're right. He became a meme because of that. People like were just rubbing their hands together, waiting for him to have such an embarrassing loss like that. But he didn't shy away from it. So I think there's a lot of maturity with him, and I think he's what I really liked in his last performance was what he did on the ground. I think that's where he's at his best, and it was just great to see him go back to that. I think he can put himself under a bit more pressure by staying on the feet, whereas if he plays to his strengths a little bit more and supplement it with the striking and go to the ground and go for submissions, I think he can be a dominant force there.
Yeah, for James Gallagher, I'm again. I just have a lot of questions, but when it comes to him, being as though you're over there in Ireland, correct? So I just want to make sure I have that
Yeah,
right. Okay, so I just want to ask, like, are the people of Ireland starving for that next Conor McGregor? Like, are they actively looking like, oh, we found one in the rough? And I guess I may ask a couple questions about him later on down the line. But is the country of Ireland sort of looking to like recapture that lightning in a bottle again? Like, so do you think he's getting pushed a little bit too fast because of that, or like how is that sort of working and unfolding?
I see. The thing is, we weren't looking for Conor McGregor. Conor McGregor just kind of came out of nowhere. So, whereas there's always been a hardcore fan base of MMA over here, and like that has definitely grown. It's still quite a new community. So I'm not sure the culture is there that we're crying out for a new superstar. I think McGregor is one who kind of transcended into like the mainstream, where people who didn't know anything about MMA knew about Conor McGregor, and still the case to this day. People know Conor McGregor, they don't know the sport. They might think he's a boxer or a wrestler or something. So I don't think Gallagher is quite there yet. I think just the Bellator, a lot of Bellator just isn't as big over here as the UFC. That is might change a little bit because I know Bellator have signed a lot of Irish fighters and they're doing 2 Irish shows a year, whereas the UFC haven't been here in years. So I think he could gain quite. He could increase his kind of following a lot by just fighting here. That's something that Conor McGregor hasn't done in a long time. But I don't know. I don't know what it takes. It's a hard thing to like. You can't really quantify star power before it happens. It just kind of happens. Like he has all the makings of a star. He speaks well. He's divisive. He's actually a very nice guy. And like having interviewed him a couple of times, like he's. I know a lot of people won't believe it, but he is a very nice guy to talk to. Um, and he's highly skilled. So I think we're not crying out for a new star like Conor McGregor, but if anyone's going to take up the mantle from him, I think it will be James Gallagher. I think he's the one everyone has their eyes on right now.
Yeah, so I want to ask, sort of to piggyback off of what you just said. What is the like? Can you describe what the MMA scene is like over there? Being as though you're obviously someone that lives over there, you would know better than us over here in the States. But just like from the Conor McGregor, like how has that trickled out? Because it's been a while since he's fought. Has it been like a boost in MMA's popularity as a whole? Do you notice more people getting into MMA, from promoters to sponsors? Like, what is sort of the general read on the community over there, if you had to say?
I don't think it's ever been stronger than it is right now. I think when Conor McGregor became a superstar, he brought a lot of eyes to it, and I think from there it developed like a big fan base built up, and that kind of brought in more fans from the mainstream. I will say that the MMA community over here has a bit of a chip on their shoulder, I guess, a bit like what America had maybe 10, 15, 20 years ago when the sport was just starting out. Whereas like the mainstream media over here is a bit like anti-MMA. It's a bit they see it as a brutal sport, and like we're almost at the point where we're still at that human cockfighting stage over here. Like that is changing somewhat. You see a lot of more mainstream outlets and stuff covering the sport, but again, there's that underlying kind of sense from some of the bigger outlets that like, oh, we're only covering this because we have to cover it, or like they're rubbing their hands together for something to go wrong, or for Conor McGregor to do something wrong, so we can write our big anti-MMA piece or send out our anti-MMA content. Like, I think the MMA community is kind of they're they're unified against that sort of thing. We know what the sport can do. We know like how it can help people, how it can save lives, how it can make people more confident, all that stuff. And yeah, I think we're kind of waiting for the older generation to kind of change their mind about it.
Yeah. So I'll just go ahead and ask it out front. How has Conor McGregor helped or hurt those efforts?
That's a very good question because he's definitely helped them, and he's helped it more than he's hurt it. Like, there's no question about it. Like, the reason why MMA is so popular in Ireland is because of Conor McGregor. He was that in Ireland. All of our sports stars before that were these kind of quiet, mild-mannered, very polite, good sportsmen who just carried out in their business, head down, weren't ostentatious, they weren't flashy. Then McGregor comes out with these one-liners, trash talk. He wears the three-piece suits, and like he fights the way he does. His a big thing in the early days was predicting the rounds and then going out and knocking the guy out in that round. So we never had a star like that before. So when he came along, that definitely there was a big explosion in MMA over here. The UFC brought an event here specifically for him to headline. Like he single-handedly brought the UFC back to Ireland essentially, and from there it's just exploded. Now his recent stuff, kind of um, outside the cage, has definitely divided some people. People don't like the way he kind of carries himself. People don't like the bragging, the trash talk. That's always been a thing people don't like because again, we come from that culture of being, polite, bowing to your opponent, all that stuff, and he kind of changed all that. Um, and again, it's fuel for the fire for those people who really hate MMA. The kind of those mainstream feature writers who just like are waiting to like write their big anti-MMA piece. Like they see someone like Conor McGregor and they're like, okay, he's our perfect scapegoat. But I think on the whole, there's no question about it. McGregor has definitely helped the MMA scene more than he's harmed it.
Okay, I was just curious because over here we always talk about like, oh, the fan base is turning against him, and his antics or this and that, but it's like we really don't know. um just because like we're not over there, we don't know how his countrymen are looking at him because we're not over there. So I just wanted to get your opinion on that. But so basically, just to sum up, the general take is that it's more or less still 50-50, just magnified. Is that a nice way to put it?
I'd say he's definitely got more support, but he's got less support now. He's got more people who kind of dislike him than they would have like 2 or 3 years ago when he was like knocking out Eddie Alvarez and all that stuff like that. That was at the height of his popularity, and then like the stuff with the Bellator cage and different things like that. You know, the stuff with Khabib. I think that left a lot of people a sour taste in a lot of people's mouths. So
Do
he's
you?
more polarizing these days.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. So to try and bring this back around, like to the up and comers, how I guess for this year, like we're already in July. Has there been anyone that you've noticed at this point that is starting to bubble up? Are you starting to hear a specific name more than you're hearing others? Is there someone else on the ground level that you think we should keep an eye out on for the rest of this year?
Oh God, it's kind of caught me off guard now. Trying to think now. Um, do you have anyone in mind? I'm completely blanking on this one.
Well, it's just like I'm thinking like because like we're talking about James Gallagher, and we're just sort of
Yeah,
talking about how McGregor has changed things, so to speak, for the better or worse. So it's just always nice to ask like, hey, is there anyone else on the ground level that you could think of at all? I mean, I'm sure there
there's
is.
there's one that springs to mind. There's a guy called Paul Hughes who's from I think he's from the north of Ireland, and he's only had one professional fight I think, and he was out injured for a long time. I know he spent a lot of time in Asia, but his debut was absolutely sensational. He just like absolutely demolished this guy, and he's one that we were keeping an eye on. He's quite young, and I think he's struggling to book a fight at the moment. But yeah, Paul Hughes, keep an eye on him. I think a lot of people expect big things out of him.
All right, that's definitely a name that. See, that's why I like having different people on because it's like you can tell me names so that way you don't have to wait 10 fights down to hear about them. But it's definitely a name we'll have to keep an eye out on for the rest of this year. But just one last thing about Gallagher before we sort of move along. When you sort of look at, there's free agency starting to become a hot topic in MMA. Other promotions are starting to gain some steam. We don't know how much, but we are starting to see, other promotions are being relevant now. And here we have a guy in James Gallagher who is following up with a lot of buzz off of what Conor McGregor built, but yet he's deciding to make his name in Bellator. We have Dylan Dennis who's deciding to make his name in Bellator. And we can talk about, them signing people when they're early on. So maybe the UFC has a different business model, but as it stands, they're choosing Bellator over the UFC. As someone that's on the ground over there, how does it like come across to you? Does it like for the fighters over there, are they recognizing that it is a little bit more split and there are more options, or is it still UFC's big name in town and those two guys are just exceptions to that?
I think for the most part they're exceptions. I think Bellator is an option for someone who has a big name. Like Bellator pick up prospects. They pick up prospects like James Gallagher was a prospect they picked up and thinking, okay, we'll build this guy. He could be our one of our stars in the future. They did that with a lot of people. They did it with Darian Caldwell. They did it with like Aaron Pico. Like they're known for picking up prospects like that. So if you're a big name on the amateur scene or you've got made some buzz on the regional scene, Bellator is definitely an option, particularly if you don't feel like you're ready for that next step up. Because the UFC is a step up again from Bellator. Like again, there's a lot of Bellator fighters who would be competitive and could even win UFC titles, but for the most part, like the depth of talent is in the UFC. Um, the other thing is Bellator plays here. Bellator have regular shows here. So if you want to be a professional fighter and fight in front of your home crowd, like, and you want to fight on a big stage, then Bellator is probably the best option. Like the UFC doesn't come here, so like if you wanna fight in Dublin, the UFC, you'll probably be waiting a while. Bellator come here like regularly, so it is an option. It is another option, and it might be a better option for depending on where you want to be in your career. Obviously, the UFC is still kind of seen as the the promised land to some effect. Still over here, like if you make it to the UFC, you've made it. But I think that may change in the future. I think that you can see a lot of fighters, making a name for themselves in other promotions, the likes of Bellator, One, KSW. There's just way more options, and then to be honest, it's good. It's good for fighters on the regional scene to have another option where it isn't just like UFC or bust.
That's good, and definitely to wrap up this sort of segment of the conversation, he's got a fight coming up September 27th, 2019. I do believe this was announced not too long ago, but he's taking on Callum Eleanor at Bellator Dublin. So do you have any prediction on that? I know it just got recently announced, so I don't want to put you too on the spot, but just sort of when you think about those two guys, do you have a prediction on that? On James Gallagher, he's coming into this fight of a 2-fight win streak. So any sort of prediction, anything you see coming out of that?
I'm not really a prediction man. Like, I think there's so many variables in the sport. It's hard to like, accurately predict a fight. But Gallagher in the main event of Dublin, it's hard to pick against him. I think he should have a good performance.
All right, definitely. Hey, that's gonna be an interesting one to see. I feel like he definitely delivers whenever it's in Dublin. So I mean, from an entertainment standpoint, so it's must-watch television. So I'll definitely be there. And again, that one's going down September 27th for anyone that wants to go ahead and catch that. Now to try and like broaden up the conversation a little bit. You're someone that you interview fighters, you talk to fighters, you've been in tune like into the sport for a while. And one of the things that I've been talking about recently is just sort of changes in media that we've seen. I know me and you have talked about it off the record. Just sort of like the landscape is changing a little bit. So a couple of the changes, just for anyone that's listening to this and they may not have an idea, we have over the past year, Ariel Helwani for even if you love him or hate him, he was the leading man, the leading interviewer for a while over at MMA Fighting. He jumps base to ESPN. MMA Fighting, for lack of a better term, gets gutted roster wise. Now, granted, they're filling it back up, and it's not an indictment on that, but that's just the facts. The Athletic gets into MMA. Then just last week, it was announced that Luke Thomas and the people over at MMA Fighting, they would, be discontinuing the MMA Hour and the MMA Beat. So, being as though you're someone that covers the sport, when you look at sort of this chain of mini events that's happened sort of under the current, what is your opinion on it? Like, what is your thought on this changing landscape of MMA media?
I think it's been a long time coming. I think there's been an oversaturation of MMA media, and I think what you're seeing is a lot of the same kinds of coverage and stuff. So I'm not sure if it's really sustainable. But I'm not saying that this is why this is happening. I think there's a lot of stuff at play here. I think ESPN coming into the MMA media market, that was a big thing that caused a lot of waves around the landscape of it. Um, but yeah, it's kind of hard to make sense of it all. I'm liking the look of the Athletic. I think that could be a really good business model. I'm not sure. I know it didn't receive the best of kind of reactions, but I guess people just don't like paying for stuff, so that's always going to happen. But I think it's a very promising thing. Looking forward to seeing that. And yeah, I know the MA is one that I'm going to miss. That was such a staple. It was such a part of the news cycle every week. It was you get the interviews. I know towards the end with Ariel, it got maybe a bit long, where it was like 4 or 5 hours of just straight MMA interviews. So maybe it was only for the hardcore fans at that point. But it's something that we will miss. I guess Ariel has his own show now at ESPN that will kind of take up the mantle there and fill that void. But it will, like, the MMA era was kind of synonymous with like MMA media. Like that was the big show. So I know it will be missed, and it'll be interesting to see what the next moves are there.
Yeah, see, it's interesting to me because it's like, we're in this with the digital streaming and everything right now. We're in this like everything is transitioning to behind a paywall, and it's starting to include the MMA media content. Like the Athletic is behind a paywall. Again, not an indictment on if it's good or bad. It's just a fact. And
Yeah,
then you look at ESPN, like even Ariel and Chael, like part of their content is behind a paywall. Luke Thomas, who is someone that, he did the MMA Hour and MAB. Part of his content now is behind a paywall. So, like, do you think that's the answer? Like, because I don't know. That's why I'm glad I can have someone like you on because no one is talking about this. It's sort of weird to ask like media people to take a look at themselves. So I do get
yeah,
it. But nonetheless, just like as someone that's like a fan of like, trying to stay up to date with the content, like it's a pain in the ass. I just got to
yeah.
say it.
Yeah, I understand. I think maybe the paywall might kind of make that easier. I think it might weed out a lot of the competition. I think it's going to get my prediction. This could be a bit of a hot take, but it'll probably get worse before it gets better. I think that a lot of companies will come up with these paywalls, and then it'll be like a lot of extra bills, and then eventually there'll be a drop off in subscriptions, and maybe the bigger ones will eat up the less popular ones, or there'll be more merging of maybe websites and different content contributors and stuff like that. So I do think that the paywall is probably a good idea. I think the less the kind of you rely on advertising revenue is probably for the best. You're kind of less, you know, chained to like what advertisers they've less an input in what goes into your content. I think that's definitely better. And I think it's good to see MMA media members getting paid. So like if they're getting paid through a paywall, the fans are happy to pay them for quality content, and the content like meets the standard of the cost. I think that's definitely a good thing. I think there's a lot of free stuff on the internet, and a lot of it's pretty shit. So if you pay for quality, like, and you get quality, I don't mind it at all. Like,
Yeah. So what do you think? Like, it's sort of like the next step in all of this because we see like there was the earlier days where MMA sort of lived just on the message boards and the forums. Then there was this explosion where everyone was trying to do podcasts and get people to subscribe and things like that. And we're in this like social media, like people can sort of do whatever they want, period. And like you said, there have been a lot of changes, but I'm trying to figure out, is it for the better or the worse? Like, are we worse off that a lot of these people that were giving us stuff for free, like, are we worse off that they're putting some of it behind a paywall, or are we better for that because it shows that it's sort of taking the next level up and maturing? Like, I don't know how to weigh that out. So how do you weigh that out? Like, as a consumer, you might, just if you're someone, you're like, oh, I got to pay now. But then at the same time, it's like, if you're really a fan, you're like, oh, that's great because there's more opportunities for, if 10 people leave MMA fighting, guess what that means? 10 spots just opened up. So
yeah,
like how do you sort of like look at that just like as a fan, like how do you weigh out like how it looks right now?
I think like the extra bills, I'm not a fan of, but I understand the sacrifice that needs to be made in order to like let's be real here. A big reason why they're doing this is for survival. Like, you know, they kind of need the extra revenue stream. Like, and again, it's kind of it's almost like kind of securing your future. Like, if like the social media thing falls down, if Google, if all that like kind of collapses, which I don't expect it to, but just if it did, like, then you're kind of you're out of like where you get your hits. I think behind the paywall is probably it's definitely what the kind of leaders in the MMA media think is the future. Maybe it isn't the future, but it's probably a good guess of what the future is going to be. And if it's going to be adopted by more sites and stuff, it will be the future. So whether it lasts as that, I'm not sure. I think it may, but again, I think there'll be a period of a lot of people bringing out the paywall, and then the bigger ones kind of surviving and the smaller ones kind of dying out. I think that's what is more than likely going to happen.
Yeah, I that's sort of what I think as well. I personally am of the opinion that we're trying to figure it out right now. Like,
Yeah,
is ads the way to go? Is the paywall the way to go? If it is the way to go, how much? What does a bundle look like? Like, these are all things everyone is trying to figure out. But I will ask, like, could you see like a consolidation sort of happen where like you have I'm just throwing it out there so no one go out there trying to report this as news, but I'm just saying, could you see a world where, the athletics MMA team isn't going well and the ESPN is like, oh, scoop? Like, could you see a world like that? Or do you think it'll just be, oh, if you fall off, and then it's sort of back to the freelance market? Like, how do you sort of like 3 years down the road, how do you see this sort of all playing out?
I think that there might be a bit more moving and switching around. Like, I don't know. I expect some of the kind of bigger media companies may fall. Like, and maybe new ones might spring up. Like the Athletics, a new one, and they seem to be like doing pretty well. So just hearing from people who work for other publications outside of MMA media, the subscription model seems to be working right now. So um, I think the people like the Athletic, I think like I hope it does well, and I hope it is successful because I think it's bringing something a bit different to MMA media, which was kind of lacking before. Um, but yeah, I expect a lot of like moving around and a lot of names going to places where you didn't think they'd go. And I think we're in kind of a transitional period at the moment.
Yeah, I definitely, yeah, that's what I think too. It's all in a transitional phase. It just sucks because I do think that this is going to last like 2 or 3 years
Yeah.
before we definitely see like solid plans in place for everyone. But that seems to make the most sense. But I guess just some random questions I did want to ask real quick. I guess sort of finish my sentence. The biggest misconception U.S. MMA fans have about European MMA is
Uh, the fighters can't wrestle. That's something that has always been said, like that. UK Irish fighters they can't wrestle, but like there's a few. We do wrestling here too.
yeah, it definitely makes sense. And
Yeah.
with guys like Khabib out there, it's like, all right, well, eventually we have to start changing that narrative. So that
Yeah.
definitely makes sense. The entire European scene, doesn't matter what promotion or what level they're on. Who do you think is, and it's fine if you want to say an obvious name, but who do you think is leading the pack?
In terms of popularity, or
In terms of like, yeah, in terms of like the biggest name coming out of Europe, like who is the person over there that you think is sort of leading the pack?
I
Is it
think
someone like Khabib or is it someone else?
it's probably still Conor McGregor. I guess like the bulk of his fan base is still in America, but like he's the biggest star the UFC's ever seen, and he's European, and he still has a big fan base over here. Habib is pretty like Habib's up there too. Like I'm not gonna lie, he got a lot of rub off McGregor. Looks like we'll see how this Abu Dhabi card goes. It may not do so well because again the paywall and it's on at a weird time for America. But I think Habib is probably like he's unproven in some respects, but I think he could be the second biggest star in the UFC. I think he's definitely has the potential to be that.
Yeah. Oh, and I guess I'll just ask you because I don't know anything about So okay, so over here for the U.S. they moved the pay per views and they put them on ESPN Plus. So you have to subscribe to ESPN Plus, then buy the pay per view, and then for the prelims or something, sometimes they'll put it on like ESPN or ESPNU or something like that. So what is going on over in Europe with BT Sport? I don't know anything about that. I'm just gonna assume if someone's listening to this, they know nothing about it. They're in the States just like me. So can you just explain to the US audience what is going on with BT Sport and why is everyone so mad at BT right now?
Okay, well, the broadcasting side of things has never been kind of my forte, but from what I understand, BT Sport always, or at least for the last number of years, they were showing all the pay-per-views for free if you bought their package. So like you buy like a package deal with BT Sport and you have the channels and then you get to watch the UFC. It's kind of a small price to pay considering the pay-per-views start at like 3 a.m. over here. So it's like, you know, but I think they're moving to a pay-per-view model now where not all pay-per-views, but some of the bigger pay-per-views you'll have to pay for. So I think this weekend, I think the John Jones one is a pay-per-view in Europe or in the UK and Ireland. I'm not sure. I think other countries in Europe they have different network providers. I think BT Sport is just Ireland and the UK. So yeah, and I know there was a lot of backlash shot again because they're already paying for BT Sport. They don't feel like it should be an extra expense, which I think is similar to the kind of the paywalls in America. And also, we've never had to pay for the pay-per-views because they've just been shown on TV. And also, just because the time it's on at, like it's on at such a ridiculous time in the morning that people don't want that extra expense because it's not at a time that's convenient to them. And it won't be for all the pay-per-views. It'll just be for the big ones. So by the sounds of it, no, nothing will be new. It'll just be the same broadcast that's fed in from the US. So it's just an extra expense for something that was already given for free. So, or not for free, but for like, a yearly subscription. So like that's why everyone's so mad over here.
Yeah, hopefully it can include like some exclusive training foot something. I mean, they
Yeah.
got to give you something. But yeah, that's crazy. And you said this weekend for the John Jones one is going to be the first one that they're actually putting this into play.
I think so. I'm not 100% sure, but I think I saw that somewhere.
Okay, well, it's I guess it'll be interesting to see how fans react to that one because that seems like a major change.
Yeah.
to just sort of ship that one in.
I guess
But
they'll lose a lot of exposure. I guess like whenever you put a paywall in front of anything, less people will pay for it, less people will watch it. So I think that's the only like you might make more money from it, but you'll lose fans from it. That's always been the case, I think.
yeah, and all right. So before we ended, there is, I guess, if we're talking about Europe, I didn't ask you about Conor McGregor, James Gallagher. I've asked you about everyone else. But before we get out of here, the last person I wanted to ask you about is obviously Khabib. When you look at Khabib, and he's someone that he's undefeated, he's run through everyone, all the accolades you can say, you can go ahead and attach it to him pretty much. Do you think that he will actually remain undefeated? Like, do you think there's anyone out there that could unseat him? And I also want to ask, like, you know, you said that he's not as big as Conor McGregor, maybe a hair underneath. But what was that rub like? Like, what was that transitional period like? Like, what is the effect you saw like rub off from him? Like, I'm sort of wondering. Like, everyone just says, "Oh, he's big in Russia," and it's like, okay, that sounds like a nice, easy cop out. But like, what is the actual like ground sort of spill off from Khabib's rise?
Yeah, I think it was such a hit. Like you just look at the pay-per-view numbers, and it's the biggest fight in UFC history. And a lot of people saw Habib win a very one-sided fight against Conor McGregor. I think that's pretty fair to say. I don't think it was that competitive at all. Um, and people just appreciate it. And again, like people go on about McGregor's antics and stuff that he did around the promotion for that fight. But Habib, when he jumped into the crowd and stuff, a lot of people saw that. A lot of people didn't like it. A lot of people loved it. Like that's just the nature of MMA fans. They love the chaos and stuff like that. So and it's another thing. It's just seeing like I know social media isn't the greatest barometer for star power, but you just look at the numbers he's getting on his social media. You look at the people who's talking about him, and you see all the stuff, all the sports stars he's like hanging out with, the media tours he's going on, and just the numbers his videos on YouTube get and stuff like that. It's like Habib just looks like he's a star, and he's one half of the biggest pay-per-view ever. So if he can I'm not sure if the Abu Dhabi card will be the biggest indicator of his star power, but if he does a pretty decent show in there, then I think he's undeniably like a star. And him against like a Tony Ferguson could be a big fight at that point, and maybe Gaethje, someone like that. I think those two have the potential to beat Habib. Tony more so, I think. I think like he's got the record for most consecutive UFC lightweight wins, and he's been in more 5 round fights than Habib. He's a bit maybe he's had maybe a longer road to it, and he still hasn't got the title. And I hesitate to call Habib the greatest lightweight in the world because Tony Ferguson is still there. Like so, I think Ferguson may beat him. I think he's got the best chance. And again, Gaethje is just one of those guys who seems to on his day can beat anyone. Like he's got that lights out knockout power. He can he can wrestle too. Like obviously not on the same level as Habib, but maybe enough to deal with Habib. And he's got cardio. So I think looking down the line of contenders there, I think Tony Ferguson and what's his name, Justin Gaethje are probably the two that you'd highlight. If Habib decides to move up to 170, I think he'd have a tougher time there. I'd love to see a fight against Kamaru Usman. I think that'd be very competitive. And if he moves up, then I think that's when you see his undefeated record could really go. Like we saw what happened to Max Holloway when he moved up, and a lot of fighters have done that with success. But it's still a tough thing to accomplish, especially between 155 and 170. There's that little bit of an extra gap in weight, so I think Habib would have his work cut out for him if he does decide to move up.
Yeah, so you think he's gonna just walk through Poirier?
I wouldn't say that, but I expect him to beat Poirier. I think Poirier is like don't count him out. I think he's got a lot. He's got a lot of skills, and he's still remarkably underrated considering he's gone on one of the best runs in lightweight history. I think the last few wins have been exceptional. All former champions, like finishes, everything. Like he's got it all. But there are levels to this, and I think Khabib might be just that little bit ahead of Dustin Poirier.
Yeah, and I think what I'm starting to let what you said, like I'm starting to let it brew a little bit about like him moving up to 170, and it's like my knee-jerk reaction is to be like, why would he do that? Like he's on such a run. But I guess when you actually look at the rest of the division, if he does pick up 2 more wins, 3 more wins in a row, one more year down the line, it's not the craziest thing in the world to think about him moving up to 170. So that is definitely something we might have to keep an eye on. You may inside scoop on that one. We may have to look back on that one.
Well, it's not really like news. I know he was looking for that GSP fight before, so like I think GSP could be like he could come back out of retirement if the Khabib fight's there for him. I think he wanted that one too.
Yeah, definitely. So, all right, with Khabib, there's definitely a lot to keep our eyes on as it moves forward. But like we said, we'll have to see what happens first. He's facing Dustin Poirier, UFC Abu Dhabi. So before we get out of here, do you have any shout outs for the people, any websites, links, social media, anything you want to let the people know at all?
I've just one shout out, and it's not me. So if anyone's into like history podcasts, my friend has this Irish history podcast called Shite Talk. It's SHITE Talk, and you'll find that on Spotify and all your podcast outlets. There's one really good episode I did on a bare knuckle boxer. So any MMA fans out there, if you want to check that out, it's well worth your time.
All right, and that's Shite Talk on Apple Podcasts. You have a Twitter, anything you want to let the people know about? Any like personal links you want to plug before
Yeah,
we
you
get
can
out of
follow
here?
me on Twitter at the Jive Master. That's all I'm plugging at the moment. So
All right, so you guys heard it there. Once again, that Shite Talk on all platforms, Apple, iHeart. Go get your fill there. And again, the Jive Master, Ben Kiely, thank you for your time. Again, that's the Jive Master on Twitter. And as always, you can find me on Twitter at Nixon_speaks. This is Chillcast MMA, chill conversations, chill people. And I'll see you guys later on in the week.